and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the BIA Knowledge Leadership webinar. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Should you wish to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. If you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Thursday, April the 21st, 2016. I would now like to turn the conference over to Ms. Robin Thompson. You may go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the team at BIA, we'd like to welcome you to our April edition of our Knowledge Leadership Series webinar, where we're joined by Hal Nicholson, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Business Information Security Officer. Before we start our program, I'd just like to remind you of a couple of our housekeeping rules. Please submit questions for Hal, as Karen said, through the chat window, and we'll get to those at the end of today's program. And as you leave today, we're going to ask you to complete a short survey for us that helps us to improve the quality and topics of our programs. As you can tell, after being with us for going on our 4th year now, our programs are planned directly from the feedback that we get from you. Also, this program is not certified for CLE, but all attendees will receive a certificate of attendance to use in self-reporting professional education credit, including states that allow self-reporting for CLE, CPE, ACEDS, or other credentialing. It is my extreme pleasure and the favorite part of my program to introduce today's speaker. Hal Nicholson is a retired resident agent in charge, cyber investigations, Western Resident Agency for the Department of Defense, a former financial crimes analyst for the FBI, and a senior consultant on some of the nation's largest eDiscovery matters. He has over 24 years of experience conducting and supervising complex fraud and cyber investigations, extensive experience in specialized areas of investigation such as white-collar crime, espionage, and fraud, extensive experience in information security risk and development, coordination, implementation, and evaluation of policies and procedures related to complex fraud and cyber investigations. And Hal, with that, I'd like to turn the program over to you.
Thanks, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I would like to just emphasize the little part that she mentioned. I have only held this position as the Business Information Security Officer for about 8 months. So I am on a steep uphill learning curve about how this applies here with the LDS Church. Just to reiterate here again real quick, what we're going to be talking about today and the things, these will be my views and not the views of the church. I don't speak on behalf of the church. That's not a role that I have here. But I am pleased and honored to be here and to talk about this role as the Business Information Security Officer. Just a real quick thing here. We got through a potential problem this morning here in Utah. They are doing the Great Utah Shakeout. It's a drill that we do here for earthquakes. I just moved up from Arizona, so I'm getting accustomed to everything that's going on here in the state of Utah. So one of the questions that comes up for me a lot is really, what was the path that you took to have a job, and what type of credentials or what might a person need? Well, I'm one of those individuals that this kind of just found its way towards me. There wasn't really formal schooling or anything back when I started heading down a path in the world of cyber. It all started for me back when I was working construction, driving heavy equipment. I was about 21 years old, down in Arizona, 110 degrees outside, and I got a diesel engine blowing on my back, and I'm out there all day long, before and after everybody else. And I decided it was time to go to school and see if I could maybe find a job that was indoors. And so I did. I went to school. I got a job at a bank, And one day when I was at the bank, they came to me and said, "Oh, we didn't realize you have a degree now. Can we promote you to manager?" So I became a manager. And then one day a gentleman walked in the door, and he tried to hand me a piece of paper. And he says, "This is for you." And I said, "Well, no, I can't accept that. We don't take subpoenas here at the branch. You got to deliver those to corporate." He said, "Oh no, this isn't that. This is a job application." I took the application from him and I went home, and it was huge. They call it an SF-171, and it had lots of information. I was up all night filling that out, waking up people and relatives and friends to get their information so I could stick it in this application. Once I did that, I didn't hear from him again for about 10 months. And then I did get a phone call, and that's where I kind of started into my law enforcement career as a financial analyst for the FBI, looking at the bank fraud that had occurred in the late 1980s and early 1990s, mostly with the savings and loans. So I began working those cases. About 3 years later, the Department of Defense contacted me and said, "We'd like you to come work for us. We know you have some computer skills, and we have some ideas in that area." And so I went to work for them, and that's where I actually became a sworn law enforcement officer for the Department of Defense, and that's where I spent my last 21 years, just working for them. Kind of an interesting side note, and maybe some of you have seen this, or we have it in your own organizations, but the day that they came to me and said, "Well, we're going to send you the computer forensic school," I said, "Okay. Happy to go." He says, "Because we're not going to waste a GS-13. That's one of the government grade levels. We're not going to waste a GS-13 on that position." Of course, I was brand new, so I was nowhere near that level or rank within our agency. And lo and behold, by the time I left, pretty much no one could work an investigation without contacting my unit in order to help them with their evidence. So you never really know what the path's going to take for you. So after that, just real quick, I was going to retire and I was going to teach high school. I thought it would be really great. I was working on the Phoenix Coding High School down in Arizona in the Phoenix Union High School District. We were ready to go actually this coming fall. It would be the year we would start our first 100 freshmen would be coming into the Coding High School. And I was at home and I received a phone call from the LDS Church. And the phone call said, "We would like to come up and have you interview for a position we have here as the Business Information Security Officer." And at that exact moment, my entire world changed from what my goals were. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that. And what I'd like to start with first is what the BISO is not. A lot of times it's kind of maybe a newer type position. I don't know if there's I hadn't really heard of it before. I knew what a CISO was, but I'd never really run across anything where somebody held this Business Information Security Officer type position. And so I'll start with what it's not. I am not the church's CISO. The church does have one. He has a staff. They work out in the IT world. They coordinate, run security projects, all the types of things that you might think a Chief Information Security Officer does. I don't work in the risk management group. They have a group that deals with information technology, the risk management. I'm not a network security engineer. I don't do code security. We have a code security team that runs through all the code of all the different applications that the church has. When I'm in the church, I'm also going to use a term today. I'm just going to refer to the church as the business of the church. It's the daily activities, the things that we do. And I don't work in the Security Operations Center. I actually work down in the finance department of the church. I have an office there amongst all the other people that work in the church's finance, from treasury, the risk management group is here, the tax department is here, all of the things that you might see or would expect to see from a large organization. But what I do is I am the bridge to the IT world when it comes to security. Every project, everything that the church does runs through my office to ensure that security is up front, not an afterthought, and that it's being thought about every step of the way when it comes to the world of the church's information. And so I have to sign off on everything that occurs. So that's kind of what I am not. So let's talk a little bit about what I actually do. and being new, and only for like 8 months, they had a job description, but I really kind of boiled it down to the 3 things that you'll see here in this slide, what I do. First is I integrate security best practices into the project methodology and solution delivery process. That's kind of a lot to get those into everything that happens here at the church, is to ensure that everything gets integrated, and it gets integrated up front. And then also, what are the best practices? So that's probably the brunt of what I do every day. The second part is I assess like the current security practices and how whatever change is about to be proposed, how that will affect security. Specifically when security is already running smoothly and we may be disrupting that security process and having to put another set of security controls and protocols in order to ensure that that new product meets all of the requirements that we have in our policy to ensure that the information of the church is safe and secure. And then the third is I am actually a senior finance manager. I manage security projects that are designed to improve the overall business security. So, and we'll talk, I'm going to be getting to all 3 of these a little bit more in depth in the next couple of slides. And don't worry, I won't be PowerPointing you to death with whole bunches of slides. Matter of fact, the next slide we're going to move to is going to be talking about the first section there, where I integrate the security best practices. And this is going to be a slide of a general methodology that is in many ways employed here. It's not the exact methodology we use, but it's a good sampling of the different parts that occur. So if you look there at the top of that slide where it says identify direction, that's where it really all begins here. Now I'm new. I haven't been through the identify direction process. However, I've taken the training and I've had some introduction to it a little bit, so hopefully I'll be able to speak and give you kind of a good concept of this. But what happens in the identified direction is it's about a 2.5 to 3 month process here where everything in the IT side of the church, and let me just back up just real quick. Here at the church, we don't really have any competition. We're not trying to ever beat anybody to market. So, matter of fact, a lot of our solutions and applications, we share that technology with other churches so that they too can have something like that, so they don't really have to reinvent the wheel. We'll provide them the technology or the understanding or some of the code so that they can go ahead and have that as well, for the members of their church. So kind of keep that in mind, because in many of your worlds, you are competition, and you do have, your deadlines are much more hard and much more stringent than mine are here. If we want to delay a project, we'll delay a project. We don't feel comfortable, it just doesn't go off. So we have this about 2.5 to 3 month process where we identify what we consider to be our technology plan. And it's going to have to deal with every system that the church has, from where membership information is held, the finances, all of that different stuff that's here. And in this plan, it's going to be covered many things. For example, maintenance to any system. If you want to bring systems offline or anything of that during the year where there might be a significant disruption to the business of the church, there's costs associated with that, and there's also security concerns. So here in this initial identified direction phase, I have an opportunity to work up front and up close with every department of the church that's bringing in whatever it is that they need done. I get first look at it so that I can begin addressing it and considering whatever security concerns might be problematic for us in the future, especially based upon the ever-increasing need in the cyber world, the new attacks, the new methodologies that are being deployed by those who wish to break into your businesses to get your information, either whether it's to gain advantage or to discredit what you do. So maintenance is one of them. A second phase of that is any project that we consider to be like a small enhancement. Just even something to a degree of, we'll go really, really small here, but let's say that we have a maintenance procedure that requires a certain enhancement to a system where we need to move from one version of software to another. Well, maybe many of you in your world have had people come and say, well, I can't just do that. I mean, if I just upgrade to that, I have no idea how everything that connects to that system is going to work. We have to address those problems, and in each one of those could potentially present another security concern for the church's information. And I will point out here real quick that, information is an asset. It is the information that makes things move forward, that keeps people informed. Loss of that information can be very devastating. It can stop operations. It can create legal problems. And I'm sure everybody on this call already knows that. And then we have the third pot, which is basically our new projects. Anything that's new that the church is going to have to literally put up or build a new system, or they want to provide a new service for the members of the church that they haven't provided before. Really quick, we have some guidelines that we kind of go by in this process, and I'm not sure if everybody does this, but there is a tendency to think that change is improvement. While that is often the case, it can also lead to inefficiency. Incremental improvements received by change must be weighed against the inefficiencies that change may cause. And those inefficiencies, those possible security weaknesses that maybe get presented are the things that I address, and that the church has decided that we need to be thinking about those at the inception of everything that we do, vice in the middle because somebody discovers it, or at the end of the project when we go, oh yeah, that's really neat and that tool works really great and everybody's happy, but by the way, that thing's completely not secure, and every API that's connecting to it can be scraped by anybody, and they can just cause us all kinds of problems. We don't want to have that at the end. We don't want to be addressing and realizing that we build a product that we can't deploy or use because we can't secure it adequately. So we need to get out up front. And my job, again, as the BISO, is to ensure that the technical specifications of that, I work directly with our my IT counterparts, and ensure that those best practices are in place. And just real quick on the best practices, we use things like the SANS Top 20, if you're familiar with that. We adhere to ISO standard 2700 and the other standards that are out there. We take those very seriously. We believe that great experts out there and great minds have put those together, and we use those to help us secure our networks, and we take their advice very seriously. So we get a new system up. We have the direction under Identify the Need. We prepare these project approval summaries, and in these, obviously the finances and things have to be guessed to about what something might cost. This gets presented to the church's presiding bishopric, and at that one time they decide what they're going to do, what the church feels that they're going to move forward on, and then this gets placed into action. However, that just doesn't mean that it will take place. Each department then will say, okay, we have certain amounts of projects that are approved, and which ones are we going to do this year? Do we have time to get them all done? Does something come up during the year that might prevent them? So they start working through the things that they consider to be the most important through the least important. So on that slide, you can see where that word align, and that align for me is the security aligning. At this very point, I get with my counterparts in the IT world, at our IT group, and we begin discussing, what these potential security problems might be. Do we have the adequate infrastructure already for something that's been proposed? Are we going to need to put up, some increased trusted solution concepts or something like that? More trusted zones where we can have, computers in a more hardened environment. Most of the church's information is publicly facing. It's broadcast out to the world, up on our web pages and other things. So we have a huge security platform from across our data classifications, from confidential to that public facing information. And all that has to be taken into effect. So, then we move into this analyze phase. And in the analyze phase is where they determine that the project is going to begin. And they say, well, okay, we've got some things we've got to do. We've got our plan, it's up, we're approved, it says Go ahead and move forward. And so they move into what they call the discovery, and it analyzes this discovery phase where they're going to discover if even the thing that they want to do, that they put an estimated cost with or an estimated time and resources, if it's even viable, if it's even really something we should do. You know, we talked about that before. Remember, a tendency to think that change is improvement doesn't mean that we need to do the change. We also have another directive here, something that I wonder if in all industry they do this, which would be, how does whatever we're doing change and affect my customer base and inherit the membership? Just because we can change it and we can enhance it doesn't mean that the average member of the church will ever see any difference in anything that they do. So there's really no importance to just change something for change's sake. And I'm not referring to something like, well, Oracle isn't going to, your Oracle application isn't going to support this version anymore, and that's the version you're on, and you're about to, lose support. That would be very important. You would then need to get to the newer versions, and you would have to figure out how you're going to implement that without breaking all your systems and causing huge security concerns. So now we move through this analyze phase, and this is what comes. So in my world, I begin to identify, the assumptions security-wise. So business analysts are doing the rest of the stuff, but I'm just looking at it purely from a security perspective. What are the constraints? What am I up against in order to get the proper security in place that I feel will need to be there, not only based upon the experience that I have and the things that I've seen over the years, but also, so that it will adhere and stay within the policies that have been written here within the church. So, we do the basic things here. We do this that you probably all do. We come up with a project, like a team charter and the purpose of the project. Team members are identified, and I'm generally a member of most of those teams in one way or another. It's hard to be in all the places that people would like me to be. But we do a lot of conference calls, meetings over the phone, over webinar, kind of like this, where you could just dial in and listen, and if you need to say something, you can get your hand raised and you can get that taken care of. And of course, project timelines are established. I said we are very flexible with our timelines, but we do establish them because it's still important to move things forward. One of the big things I do is I take a look at it from a security perspective, and I say, well, what is the as-is process right now? What is the security process around this particular small enhancement that's about to occur? And I say, okay, well, that's where we are now. And then, we'll move down through, and then we'll say, okay, well, this is where we're going to need to be if they're successful in, making this small enhancement. So I need to understand that gap between the as-is, where we are now, and where they're going to be, so that I can ensure that whatever that security is. And you might say, well, what kind of security I'm talking about? Well, perhaps this enhancement is now going to, this particular system will now house a particular type of data. So where before it didn't have certain, like, let's say medical information. The church has, thousands upon thousands of employees, and we have, medical plans and different things like that, and certain information is kept and where people can access and, take care of, their medical information. Well, we have to keep all that secure. We have all the rules just like most people do, HIPAA and all that other stuff to be concerned about. So, so I need to know what that gap is, and from a security perspective, so that I can say, okay, well, I have that here, and that system was okay over there, but now they want to do this enhancement, and then they're going to deliver a new definition of data to that system. Well, that might change where that system has to be housed in the network, all the way down to what new firewall protocols are going to be in place, down to exactly where it's going to sit in the server rack and what zone it's going to be in, so that we can say, yeah, that is in one of our trusted zone, and it meets a certain security requirement that we have, that we go through to where we certify each system and says, yeah, this meets protocols. So yeah, we have quite a few steps that go on in place, and probably what you're seeing here on the methodology, if we were to go into every little step and every little detail of everything, we'd be talking about it for days. But we don't have that kind of time. Sometimes I already talk too much. But then, once we get the plan and it's down and we're ready and the business case has been developed, we're all set. So in the business case, hopefully everybody's familiar with, where the business case, where you write your business rules. And then you're going to move into the plan phase where we're going to develop, our business requirements. And, there is a difference between a plan and a requirement. Between a rule and a requirement. And just real quick, so just give a real quick example. Like a rule would be, a driver of a vehicle must have a driver's license. That's the rule. We must all have that in our possession. But the requirements associated with that would be that, that there's an expiration for each driver's license, that you have to have tests. So you have business rules and you have your business requirements. And we're very, very conscious here about the difference of what that is so that it can drive the work forward accurately for us. So again, then we'll move into the plan phase. We will refine the overall scope and goal again, take another good hard look at it. We like to use the term here, we get together. We don't really call them meetings. We like to say we counsel together. It always makes meetings a little less burdensome to go to, as you say, oh, I've got a council to go to. So, and in here again, I'll be defining all those security requirements. And at this point in inception in this process, I will insert into our project, or whatever it is that we're enhancing, the actual requirements so that they can be followed by the IT group. And I will work very closely with them. None of it will be a surprise, and that they will then get to see it. And so in the 8 months I've been here, I have done this piece numerous times already with things that we're doing. So I'm real familiar with what my security requirements are and what I need to have done. I am looking forward to the overall plan and seeing it over the next years as I'm here longer. We also have to assess, privacy, what that impact is. Again, we perform more requirements in our gap analysis. Where are we now and where are we at, and how, are we on the right path to get there? Every stakeholder is also involved. Everybody gets to weigh in, especially the stakeholders, and they get to say, yeah, this is moving in the right place. We do the typical things that everybody does, especially in IT. We create wireframes. We build it out in a small scale and say, yeah, this is what it's going to look like. We do extensive testing all the way up from development through staging environments before it ever makes it out into production to ensure. We love to do things here like, pen test and do risk assessments and vulnerability assessments, and just to make sure, because with as many things as you have in your network, you probably learned over the time, we're extremely, extremely vulnerable as we move our businesses forward. Especially with the technology that comes out, sometimes it's hard to say, we need that technology. We'll fall behind on our competition, or we really need to have that. That's a great thing for someone to have. The LDS Church is, I don't know the specific number. It's about 146 countries worldwide that we're in. So something that we produce or make here for the United States is not necessarily something that they're going to care much about in the Philippines or in Bolivia or some other place in the world, especially in an area where they really have trouble connecting to the internet and staying connected to the internet. Some of these enhancements don't really help them much. They help other parts of the world, but not necessarily them. So we also have other projects that are designed specifically for those parts of the world. So it's really quite vast in what is actually run through this plan. To help the members throughout the world, whether it be the welfare program of the church or the missionary program of the church. And again, with every project, we do the same basic things. We perform performance metrics, and this is a big point for me, is that I need these metrics to include the security so that I know that the security is meeting the goals and requirements. That it's coming up and saying, yeah, that is saying it's secure. So when something is pen tested, they say, yes, this is what we found. We fixed these holes. That I need to know those metrics are being met. That those requirements of mine are there. And again, every step of the plan, we have a section in here where we manage changes, because change is inevitable. It will occur. and you need to be able to manage those changes and move forward. And then again, we move into the build and validate phase. I'm going to kind of speed up a little bit. I think we're moving a little bit quicker here, and I had some other things I wanted to talk about. We're going to build and we're going to implement this. And then, of course, there will be reports back, and definitely a lot of reporting back on how things are. We will also ensure that training is made available to those who will have to use the system, or out into the general membership of the church, worldwide. If it's something's coming to them, they need to know about this. They need to have the training so that it's not a surprise and they know how to use the tool that comes to them. We have a lot of requirements as well, too, that have to be addressed. There's a lot of data privacy issues that are occurring now. We have, for example, in Canada, they want to make sure that anything that the church has here in the U.S. that's associated with a Canadian citizen, that somewhere in Canada that same data resides. So we just finished up a project maybe about 6 or 7 months ago where we put up a system up there. We took all of the Canadian records that we had here, we made a copy of it, and we stuck them all in Canada just as they required us to do. And of course, I've really paraphrased. I mean, there was a lot more to the requirements than that, but we got all of that done. We are very, very mindful of the European Union and the data there and how and the things that are happening there in their discussions as we prepare over here. We take all that type of stuff into account with the data and those constraints that will place upon it. Because obviously it would be just so much easier just to keep it all in one central location, but we're not going to be able to do that in the future. And we need to be mindful of those laws and make sure that those are implemented throughout the world so that we comply with every country's rules and regulations as they define them to us. And then again, in the end of that, we deliver our products, we develop closeout reports, kind of like postmortems, how well did the project run, all the same typical things. And so within the security world, everything that I did we get this into the right zone? Did it all happen correctly the way that we needed? So some of those points of security that I talk about, one is we have a process here where we do a pre-risk assessment. So I ensure that every step of that pre-risk assessment is done. So they have to respond back to me and say, yeah, this is all done, and send me the report. I review those reports, and then I sign off on them and say, okay, we're good. If it's a large enough product, we do a detailed risk assessment, and I need to see those risk assessments as well and what they're determining. If I move through the slide here a little bit, some of the other stuff to kind of give you kind of a concept of, that I'm not just staring at, a methodology chart all day and determining what I need to do. We have, just like probably most industries, we have a trusted solution program where we assess the maturity level of the security throughout all of our IT systems. And I run major projects to ensure that these maturity levels are met. And these maturity levels are generally built upon, industry best practices. And so if data meets a certain standard, we absolutely want to ensure that we have a certain level of a trusted solution that surrounds that data so that only X certain people can get to it, that all the user and controls are all in place so that we don't just have everybody that can look at all the data. Lots of stuff is broken down just on a need-to-know basis. People have lots of work to do here. Not everybody needs to be looking at everything. They just need to focus on what they're doing. And so the church has turnover. You have to ensure that those users are, removed from the systems, and that you only have the authorized person or the person whose stewardship it is to, over that data to be accessing that and performing those duties. And I imagine in the IT world, and any case that I ever ran at the DoD, it usually came down to somebody's credential that had been compromised, and then a lot of times it was a credential that had been compromised by an account that they just didn't realize was still active and available because they hadn't removed it from the system. Some employee that had left, and maybe he decided to come back and do some damage to the company, or take some information from the DoD, or he didn't realize he still had that credential and he had it on a file on his computer and it got malware or something on his end. But whatever that situation was, keeping your users lists to those who to their proper rights and roles and responsibilities is extremely important. One that's extremely burdensome, but one that's very important. And I run major projects here with all of our systems to ensure, so with my team, they're constantly having these reviewed and going out to data stewards, data holders, data stewards, and saying, all right, here's your list of users. You need to certify back that this is the right roles. And so we do a lot of that kind of stuff. Seems a little bit boring, but we do that. I also, proof of concepts. Especially for data analytics, we're doing some stuff here now, taking a look at some new data analytic type things that will help us, place risk based upon how we might have information in our systems aggregated. Do we have too much information accessible too easily? Should we be pulling it from more locations so that our risk level would be lower if we did have a compromise? So we're looking at some of the tools out there now. We have a couple of big proof of concepts going on where companies are coming in and they're showing us their tool and how it would work and what it looks like as we do some tests against some of the data that we have so that they can show us how their analytics will help us to ensure that if we have German information, people from Germany, and their information is here, but it's not, that information can't be contained here in that manner, that we can look through and scan through our systems and say, oh, nope, we need to get that shouldn't have been placed there. We need to get that removed and put into a different system. And that's definitely an ongoing thing. And we're looking every day for better tools to help us to manage that type of data. And of course, I do policy creation review. I look to make changes, so things can be more efficient. Again, security trends, I spend a lot of time. Like I told you, I'm on an uphill curve right now trying to learn with everything that's going on out there. One thing was to come as an investigator where you can kind of go in like a dry erase board that's completely blank and you say, okay, what's the complaint? And then you just start filling out what you need to know. Here, I kind of, I need to know what the things are that are coming our way so that I can speak succinctly to them, to the questions that come to my group that get asked. So that's kind of, for the most part, kind of like an overview of how the church sees the business information security officer. Again, I run everything from, looking at the methodology and being up place all the way down to I'm an actual finance manager here, and I run my own projects to ensure that the church's information systems are adequately secured and that the IT department. And again, I'm that bridge. If there's a concern from the IT world security-wise, the whole team comes to me and says, can you run this down for us? And so it gets a little bit busy. Anybody have any questions? I think we're about 40 or so minutes into this already.
We have got several questions, really good ones too, Hal. We're looking for some more definition for where the CISO ends and the BISO begins. For example, are you saying that the CISO basically is in charge of constantly testing for security vulnerabilities while the BISO is more in charge for setting strategy and direction? If so, why would we need two people to handle those duties?
That's a good question, and hopefully I haven't on the confusion side. So every project, whatever it is that the church is going to do, it's my responsibility from the business side to approach it from the perspective up here, in the business department of what that security is that needs to be in place. Where the Chief Information Security Officer, I guess how I look at it, his job is to ensure that the security is there, that those operation centers are up and running 24 hours a day and that they're addressing with whatever risks are identified. One of the problems that I think that they probably had before when they decided for this position was that there was a knowledge breakdown between how the business interpreted what they were trying to understand and versus how IT was coming back and saying this is how we're going to secure it. Because these requirements needed to be written so that it would be accurate, and it's my job to bridge that gap. So I wish I could see that question. Is it written up here?
Yeah, look under answered. It said, is CISO basically in charge of constantly testing for security vulnerabilities while the CISO is more in charge for setting strategy and direction? If so, why do you need two people to handle those duties?
That's a great question. It's a great question. Probably one that I ask myself every day, because our Chief Information Security Officer is a pretty squared away guy, and so is his team. But I think when it comes down to assisting and being literally on ground with the business team, it greatly adds that value, because the business itself is as large as the IT department in many cases. And if the CISO was here all the time, up here talking and discussing with the business side, he wouldn't really be able to be out there handling his other side of the job, which would be the things that are mentioned there, ensuring that, his risk management is done, that new security that they want to put in, or projects that they want to run, which, by the way, will come through here for me to sign off on as well. It's a great question, one that I'll continue to think more about.
Just to add on to that point, the last lecture series that I went to talked about the need to separate those duties, because one is focused on security and one is focused on, the BISO is focused on information as an asset, which depreciates and appreciates as the overall strategy manager.
Yeah, I think that would be definitely one of the reasons that I'm here, is to ensure that the asset of our information is appropriately addressed, that we don't lose the value of that information, and that we don't publish that information in an incorrect manner.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Hal.
No, I was just going to say, because, I kind of think about, like when I have my interactions with the CISO, we actually do a once-a-month direct coordination between us. And, the things that he brings in, generally have to do with, the risks and things that he's identified that they've had to deal with. And he will come to me and say, what can you do on your side, in these, because he has the same project list that I have, and say, is there some way that in this project here we can help solve this problem that we've identified out here? Again, I talk about that bridge. He might be able to come in and say it, but he's pretty busy running his world. That way he can just pass off that type of problem, and then I can handle it, directly, as a business or as a finance manager here, directly with the people here that would need to know, and I can help speak that language, because I can kind of speak on both sides. We talked about that before. I kind of just have this really strange history in education. My education was in business, but yet all my work experience was mostly law enforcement, in doing investigations in the cyber community. Exactly,
and to make a point on that, one of the other points made in February, we were joined by Jeff Ritter, who was an adjunct professor at Oxford, who talked to us about, from the governance perspective, his focus is mainly that the information was a financial asset of the organization, which, again, as we've discussed, can appreciate and depreciate. And as I look at the industry, I'm seeing job descriptions for BISO to report to finance. Do you think that could be a reason why we're seeing that reporting structure to finance rather than to the legal organization?
It might be, and I'm going to tell you, I apologize. I'm just not the expert yet. Like 8 months into this, and I'm on this direct uphill turn. Matter of fact, being asked to speak has made me actually sit down and think more. I really love the statement that he has here, that where does the CISO end and the BISO begin? And I will let you know. I'm not sure that there's a beginning and ending. I think my two-way street with him and his team is 6 lanes across in both ways with what we're doing. I wish I had a staff bigger so I could bring the business's concerns quicker and more succinct to him.
Exactly.
So it's a great question. It's one I'm going to spend some time on.
Yeah, and the position itself is a new position. We're just now seeing the organizations bring these positions in within the last year. So it's relative to your length of time in the position as to how long it's existed in the industry. Here's another great question. With global nature of the business, what methods are used to keep abreast of legal implications and changes? Is that a full-time role in and of itself?
Yeah, I would think so. The church has a legal department, and it also has a data privacy group, and I interact with them whenever I have questions or don't understand something that I might be having to address. So I would say here, at least for the LDS Church, that yes, those are full-time roles for other people that I can call upon to get their expertise whenever I need it. We're not assuming anyone in the world now of this IT and information and operations that anyone is the overall expert at anything. This takes this entire team here to conduct the business of the church. With whether it's a request associated with the from a country that having some troubles with refugees, maybe they need a donation or something. All of that, it takes this whole entire team of whether or not that's going to happen. So,
what size is your support group?
I'm not sure what my support group.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
for the business unit that you operate.
Okay, so like for me right now, it's myself, and I have one security analyst for all of that I talked about.
Excellent.
We're very, very busy with all of the different projects, so I rely heavily on every other expertise that is available to me. And of course, everybody is so willing because security is just ever present here. We talk about it all the time, and because I might be the security officer, but I can't do the security. I have to get everybody else to be thinking about it as well. I have to have them think about it right from every idea that they come up with. Is this a problem? Could this place our data at risk if we do this? If I send data from one system to another system so some other department can get that, is that even a good idea? Is that, could that cause a problem? Because the IT guy will look at you and say, oh yeah, I can make that happen, and he'll just make it happen. But there we go, we've exposed data, and we've aggregated data that we didn't want aggregated in a particular way.
Exactly, and you've brought up another point that was brought up about interacting with the communities of practices. We've examined some of the topics that our attendees ask us to look at. We're seeing communities of practice that work together in information management, privacy, risk, compliance, and legal, and you seem to touch on that your activities in managing the organization's information that work with and touch with these other communities. Do you find that to be the case?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again, Robin?
Are you working with the other communities like privacy, risk, compliance, when you are managing the information as business information security officer? And
I do.
Go ahead.
I do. I interact with all of them. When I write a security requirement or I sign off on one of these projects, I'm literally saying, yeah, we're good to go on this, and I don't see any security concerns beyond what has been listed here, and as long as these are solved, you can move forward. And so, there's lots of people that I interact with. I talk to, anybody that has a stewardship over any type of data. I'm interacting with them and getting their concerns, meeting with the data privacy group, meeting with the legal group, meeting with anybody that I feel that I need to, discuss this matter with before I say, yeah, that looks like we can do that.
Interesting.
So there was one question that I saw something you sent me about the business versus like a non-governmental organization like the church. I just wanted to say it was a fascinating question, and I think about it all the time because I haven't really thought about it in that manner. I came from that direct government job working for the Department of Defense, and now I'm working for the church. Organizations are, in a lot of cases, a little bit similar. The church has its own entire set of acronyms that they use to discuss everything. I think learning the new language has been one of the toughest things for me. And if anybody here was ever associated with the Department of Defense, I don't think anybody has more acronyms than them. As a matter of fact, some acronyms mean 3 and 4 different things.
My gosh. We've got time for one last question. Do you measure analytics surrounding the value of information in your role?
I don't specifically do that. The risk management group out under the CISO currently does that. However, the data privacy group, they do. They have analytics that they run on their data to determine, what what it would be. And again, we're doing those proof of concepts now, looking for tools that will actually help us just kind of get a holistic approach of that type of stuff.
Fascinating. Well, I wanted to thank all of our attendees today for coming to our April webinar, where we talked a little bit about the rising position of the Business Information Security Officer. And I wanted to tell you next month we have a special date for our program. It will be May 12th, and we're excited to tell you we're joining with the ESI Roundtable to put on a presentation about eDiscovery team development. We're going to be joined by Melissa Rogozinski, who's the founder of the ESI Roundtable, and joining her will be Carrie Fowler of Regents Bank, Allison Skinner of the American College of E-Neutrals, and Amy DeCesare of Allied World, and we're excited to bring that program to you in May. We'll send you some information on it with your thank you for attending emails that you get from us. And lastly, I'd like to thank our special presenter, Hal Nicholson, for his valuable time in being with us today.